In the current situation in the Middle East, the Euphrates River continues to face a severe decline in water levels, directly affecting millions of people in Syria and Iraq who rely on it for water, agriculture, and daily needs. According to the United Nations and other environmental reports, severe drought, climate change, and the extensive use of water for irrigation and dam systems in upstream countries are some of the main reasons for the decreased flow of the Euphrates River. In some areas, the water has dropped so much that previously submerged riverbeds and old geological formations have become exposed. As a result, reports and viral online claims have emerged about strange holes or structures allegedly appearing under exposed areas.
Sa ilalim ng Euphrates.
However, according to experts, most of these are likely natural results of erosion, landslides, and the prolonged drop in water levels. And there is still no independent evidence proving any supernatural or unusual explanation. But before we start the discussion, I'd like to ask you to leave a like and please subscribe to our channel as well. This is a huge help for us content creators. So, let's get started. In a broader context, the Euphrates River is one of the most critical water systems in the region, and it has long been the center of water resources among the countries that depend on it. The continuous decrease in water levels is not just an environmental issue, but also a geopolitical concern that affects the stability of the entire region. As we go deeper into the Euphrates River system, a more complicated picture of this area emerges, not just as a river, but as a geologic and historical corridor that is gradually revealing previously hidden underground formations due to the lowering of water levels and erosion. According to reports from geological and archaeological observations in the region, rivers like the Euphrates naturally undergo processes such as riverbank collapse, sediment shifting, and cave formation over thousands of years. When the water level drops, cavities and outward-like structures that may have been hidden underground for a long time become more visible. This is where the rapid spread of interpretations online comes in. There are groups that connect these kinds of discoveries to biblical texts, particularly the Book of Revelation, where the Euphrates is mentioned as part of the symbolic narrative about judgment and end-time imagery. However, according to many biblical scholars, these kinds of verses are often symbolic and not direct geological predictions or modern physical events. At the same time, ancient Babylon, a city located near the Euphrates River, is also often mentioned in historical records. According to historical sources such as Herodotus and modern archaeological studies, during the time of Cyrus the Great in 539 BC, the natural river system was used as part of the military strategy in the fall of Babylon. It was reported that the flow of the Euphrates was diverted so that soldiers could enter the city through the river gates while the water was low. According to biblical texts such as Isaiah chapters 44 and 45, there are parts of the prophecy that mention the drying up of water and the role of Cyrus as an instrument in the return of the Israelites from exile. In academic theological studies, this is considered an example of the intersection between historical narrative and religious interpretation, and not everyone reads it as a literal prediction of modern evolution. Overall, the Euphrates River continues to be a focal point connecting history, religion, and natural science, where actual geological changes often serve as a basis for various interpretations and broader discussions about the past and its meaning in the present. According to historical and archaeological records, some details about Cyrus the Great can be found not only in the Bible, but also in non-biblical sources. One of the most well-known examples of this is the Cyrus cylinder, an ancient artifact that is currently in the British Museum. The inscription here discusses Cyrus's policy of allowing displaced peoples to return to their lands and rebuild their temples. From the perspective of historians, this is important because it is one of the earliest documented examples of early policy on religious tolerance in the so-called ancient world. Because of this, the fall of Babylon is often seen by historians as a combination of military strategy, political timing, and the use of natural river conditions. not just a simple battle, but a more complicated event in the history of the empire. In religious interpretation, especially in some Christian teachings, these kinds of historical alignments are often given meaning as part of a broader pattern of prophecy fulfillment. But according to academic biblical scholars, it's important to separate historical evidence from theological interpretation to avoid mixing fact and belief-based reading. Following these discussions, attention is once again turning to the Euphrates River because of new online claims about large underground structures that were allegedly discovered beneath it. According to geologists and archaeologists who study river systems, these kinds of formations may be the result of natural processes such as sediment collapse, underground erosion, and long-term water flow changes, especially in old riverbeds. On the other hand, there are interpretations in some religious circles that associate the Euphrates with symbolic parts of the Book of Revelation. In particular, it mentions the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates, but from the perspective of many theologians, such texts are usually read as apocalyptic symbolism rooted in the literary style of that era, and not as a literal or modern geological interpretation.
Or modern-day prediction.
In current expert studies, there is no independent archaeological confirmation that the discoveries in the Euphrates have a direct connection to the contents of apocalyptic texts. Most of the reports remain speculative and are not yet supported by peer-reviewed findings. From the perspective of many biblical scholars, such texts belong to the genre of apocalyptic literature, which commonly uses symbolic imagery to express ideas of judgment, world transformation, and moral warning to ancient communities. At the current level of knowledge in archaeology and geology, there is also no independent scientific or archaeological evidence proving the existence of a discovered sealed chamber or massive underground structure beneath the Euphrates River that is related to the contents of apocalyptic texts. Claims like these, when they appear online, often do not go through peer-reviewed verification, and they remain speculative or part of interpretive storytelling on the internet. On the other hand, the Euphrates River itself is historically significant because some of the world's earliest civilizations, including Mesopotamia, emerged there. According to archaeological studies, the cities in this region used river systems for agriculture, transportation, and defense strategies. Because of this, it's only natural that many ancient structures and layers of human settlement can be found, especially around the river in Iraq and Syria. However, the presence of ancient cities and archaeological remains does not equate to modern interpretations of supernatural imprisonment or apocalyptic physical constructs. In the field of archaeology, large underground spaces in these areas are usually associated with natural cave systems, ancient water channels, or human-made tunnels that had practical uses during that time. In experts' final analysis, the major challenge in these narratives is separating empirical evidence from symbolic interpretation. The Euphrates may continue to be a center of religious meaning and cultural imagination. But from a scientific standpoint, claims need to be supported by clear archaeological documentation before being considered a factual discovery. In this context, the discussion deepens, not because of actual new evidence, but because of the ongoing interaction of history, faith, and modern information in the digital age. According to experts in archaeology and biblical studies, apocalyptic texts such as the Book of Revelation belong to a genre that uses symbolic and poetic language to express ideas about judgment, historical upheaval, and spiritual warning for ancient communities. From this perspective, it's important to remember that the interpretation of such texts varies depending on theological, traditional, and academic approaches. In the field of archaeology, reports claiming that there are inscriptions or chamber structures that directly match apocalyptic descriptions are not yet supported by verified peer-reviewed findings from legitimate excavation reports in the Euphrates region. The underground spaces found in such places are usually associated with natural geology or with ancient human-made structures that had practical uses such as storage, water systems, or burial sites. However, from the perspective of religious communities, these kinds of narratives often become a lens through which old prophecies are reinterpreted in the context of the modern world. According to theologians, this kind of interpretation is part of a broader tradition of apocalyptic interpretation, but it is not automatically considered physical evidence of the literal fulfillment of prophecy. In a broader perspective, the Euphrates River region remains important in the study of so-called ancient civilizations, geopolitics, and environmental change. The actual scientific discourse focuses on water scarcity, climate stress, and its effects on the populations of Syria and Iraq. These are issues with clear documentation from international organizations, such as the United Nations and the World Bank. When it comes to global conflict, there are political scientists and historians who view the modern era as a time of highly interconnected conflicts, but this is not considered direct evidence of any particular prophecy. In academic analysis, the increased visibility of conflict is often the result of global media, geopolitical complexity, and the acceleration of information flow through technology. Overall, the interpretations about the Euphrates and the apocalyptic passages remain at the intersection of belief systems, historical study, and modern information dynamics, where the meaning changes depending on the lens used by each group. The 20th century is often considered by historians as one of the greatest turning points in the history of modern warfare. The First World War and Second World War were no longer just local conflicts. They reached many continents. A huge number of countries were involved and left an enormous number of casualties among both the military and civilian population. According to historical records and estimates from scholars, the total number of deaths in the two wars reached tens of millions. And this also resulted in the collapse of empires and the repeated reshaping of the global political order. In the present time, technology is changing how the world views conflict, according to international observers and media scientists. Wars and tensions are no longer just local. Through the internet and real-time reporting, news from Ukraine, the Middle East, Africa, and other regions is immediately accessible to the whole world. Because of this, the feeling of global conflict becomes more continuous. According to reports from the United Nations and other monitoring organizations, although there is no new world war, the types of conflicts have increased, such as civil wars, proxy conflicts, terrorism, cyber warfare, and hybrid conflicts that are no longer confined to the traditional battlefield. In this context, the spread of information also becomes faster, including misinformation and speculative reports, which sometimes add to global tension even when the actual situation on the ground has not yet been confirmed. In the field of religious interpretation, there are some scholars and believers who view Matthew 24 as an apocalyptic discourse that discusses patterns of turmoil and uncertainty in human history. However, in academic theology, these are often read as general moral and historical warnings, not as an exact timeline of modern events. At the same time, there is another frequently cited text from 2 Timothy that discusses what is called the last days, where it describes the changes in human behavior and values. In scholarly interpretation, such letters are reflective of social conditions during the time of writing and can also be used as moral reflection in different historical periods, including the modern era. Sociologists and cultural analysts often pay attention to the changes in people's values and behavior from the 20th century up to the present. Some of the commonly mentioned are the increase in self-centered behavior, pride, lack of gratitude, and the weakening of strong relationships within the family. According to some social research studies, this does not necessarily mean that these behaviors are new, but rather that they are more noticeable now because of the wider visibility of social behavior in the digital age. Through social media and online platforms, personal identity is more exposed, more curated, and more measured through engagement, likes, and public validation. In this context, the concept of radical individualism emerged, where the focus of decisions and identity is more centered on the individual rather than the community. According to cultural studies, this is further reinforced by modern digital systems that provide a constant feedback loop of attention and comparison. Alongside this, there are family and social researchers who are looking into the changes in household structures in different parts of the world. Because of urbanization, migration, and economic pressure, the form of the family is becoming more diverse, and the stress factors affecting relationships within the home are increasing. In the field of digital society studies, the impact of constant connectivity is also being emphasized. According to global reports, smartphones and algorithm-driven platforms have a significant influence on attention span, emotional well-being, and the way people form their opinions. In some religious and philosophical interpretations, traits such as self-focus, materialism, and social fragmentation are sometimes linked to old moral teachings as reflections of human behavior in different eras. However, from an academic perspective, these are more often seen as products of social, economic, and technological change rather than the literal fulfillment of prophecy. Overall, the modern era continues to be examined as a period where technology, culture, and human behavior are interconnected, and its effects are becoming more visible because of the speed of information and global connectivity. Overall, the discussion surrounding the Euphrates River, the history of Babylon, and interpretations of apocalyptic texts show how important it is to properly separate evidence, interpretation, and belief. From the perspective of historians and archaeologists, the Euphrates remains an important river in the study of ancient civilizations and modern geopolitical issues. The changes in its water level can be better explained by climate change, dam systems, and regional water management, rather than the supernatural explanation spreading online. On the other hand, the religious texts that are often associated with these topics continue to provide symbolic meaning for many people. According to biblical scholars, apocalyptic writings usually use imagery and symbolism to convey the moral and spiritual message of their time, not as exact scientific predictions of modern events. In the modern world, the impact of information has become even stronger because of social media and digital platforms. News, rumors, and interpretation spread quickly, so critical thinking and verifying sources become important before accepting any sensational claim. In the end, the true importance of these kinds of issues is not just about what literally happened or will happen, but about how we understand the connection between history, faith, and present reality. The Euphrates, like many symbols in history, continues to serve as a reminder of the deeper connection between humans and nature, culture, and beliefs.